Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Teachers Guild of New South Wales. The Teachers Guild of New South Wales acknowledges the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this event. We pay our respects to elders past, present of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters throughout Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. Patrick Nam. As the Vice President of the Teachers Guild of New South Wales, I would like to thank you for joining us for our Guild Education series on the topic today, Importance of Students Engaging with ICT and ChatGPT. It is my great pleasure to be joined by our distinguished panel to discuss this important topic more broadly. Our panel this evening includes Mr. Daniel Edwards, STEM Specialist Teacher at Montello Primary School, Mr. Matthew Esterman, Director of Innovation and Partnerships, Our Lady of Mercy College, Dr. Shibani Antoinette, Lecturer and Researcher at the Transdisciplinary School, University of Technology, Sydney, Dr. Jonathan Mascarella, Director of Innovation, Loreto Kirribilli, Dr. Keith Haggart, Lecturer in Learning Design at University of Technology, Sydney, and Dr. Lauren Nussin, School of International Studies and Education, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, University of Technology, Sydney, and Guild member of the Teachers Guild of New South Wales, who will be moderating this event. Thank you for our panel for joining us today. For some housekeeping, please feel free to share your experiences, thoughts, and questions in the chat function, and pose any questions to the panel through the Q&A box on the Zoom control panel. Please keep your Q&A questions short and relevant to the topic on what we are talking about today. Our host will moderate and will tend to ask questions during our discussion panel. Thank you, Daniel, Matthew, Shibani, Jonathan, and Keith for joining us today.
Thank you, Pat, and welcome everybody to this first of the Zoom into the Guild events for 2023, and a very exciting one, a very exciting time actually to be discussing this topic. So tonight we're going to be looking at the importance of students engaging with ICT, and we're also going to be looking at ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence sort of platforms and tools that are making themselves very much a feature of sort of media discussion around education at the moment. So we would like to, as Pat said, invite you to ask questions if you have any in the chat. But before we get started, thank you to those of you who have already nominated questions to guide the discussion tonight. I would like to just take a moment for each of our panelists to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about their own role and how they work with technology and education, and perhaps address a little bit about artificial intelligence at the moment before we actually get into some proper questions. So Shimani, I might actually come to you first. If you wouldn't mind just giving a quick intro, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. My name is Shibani Antoinette, and I'm a lecturer at TD School. And my research is particularly on artificial intelligence in education and learning technologies that support learners. And I particularly worked on automated tools for writing feedback. So it's very much relevant to ChatGPT and what it can provide students. But we're also really interested in how learners can critically engage with these tools to develop their own intelligence, along with using the capabilities of such tools. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. Thanks.
Already, I think this might need to go for more than an hour, but thank you, Shivani. That's fantastic. Keith, I might pass over to you next. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Lauren, and hello, everyone. My name's Keith Haggart. I'm a lecturer in learning design here at UTS, and I'm particularly interested in, I guess, the way that learning technologies and pedagogy and andragogy and all those kinds of things intersect in order to create great learning experiences. And as you can imagine, quite a few people are very nervous and very excited, and I'll admit to being a bit of both about the potential of artificial intelligence to change the way that we might approach specifically assessment, but I think it's got potential far beyond that to talk about learning itself. So I'm hoping that we'll get a bit of a chance to discuss that tonight.
Wonderful, thanks, Keith. Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Yes, so my name is Jonathan Mascarella. I'm the Director of Innovation at Loreto Kirribilli. My focus really at the moment is on the strategic implementation of technologies and the consideration of technologies when it comes to e-learning, professional learning, and the implications that it has at a school level. How can we respond to these disruptive technologies that we've responded to throughout age? It's not the first technology that we've hit that's been disruptive. It certainly will be disruptive, I think, and an opportunity tonight to discuss that level of disruption, the opportunities, the things that this will bring us in education, I think, as we move towards this next phase of a very interesting time in education, certainly post the pandemic that we've come out of. So thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Daniel.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Edwards. I'm a STEM specialist teacher at Montello Primary School, which is in Burnie, Tasmania. And look, I'm admittedly quite relatively new to using AI in education, but I think it's important that as educators we're staying ahead of the game and able to develop proactive and more responsive measures the way that we're using technology rather than reacting and banning things like that. So I think we're at a really exciting time, and that AI definitely has the potential to improve teaching and learning, and really excited to see where we're able to get to with that, and looking forward to a great chat with everyone today. I'm glad to be here. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And Matthew, or do you prefer Matt?
Oh, Matt, please, Matthew, when I'm in trouble, that's the only time. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone. Hi, I'm Matt Esterman. I'm the Director of Innovation and Partnerships at Our Lady of Mercy College in Parramatta, which means I get to work on a bunch of different initiatives and events and projects with students and my colleagues. And I guess I'm most excited about AI because it gives us an opportunity to stop and really rethink all different aspects of school. It gets us, like others have said, we get to rethink elements of learning and what that means and who does it and how they do it. What teaching means and who does it, how they do it, how schools operate, when they operate, how they operate, in ways that we just haven't felt before. So of course we've had some, say, learning management systems that have been around for 20, 30 years, and they made us rethink how and when and where learning can happen. But this, in the hands of students and in the hands of teachers individually and collectively, can have some real impacts across systems, across countries and across the world. So I'm really keen to hear from everybody about how they've been experimenting and exploring. Really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, well, we might just start off, I think, by just a brief sort of overview about ChatGPT and what it is, what it exactly is, and some of the sort of impacts that it's having already. So, Jonathan, would you mind just giving us a rundown of what it is and what you're seeing in education currently around ChatGPT?
Yeah, definitely. Look, ChatGPT as a technology is really a chatbot by any other name, but its capabilities, I suppose, are much more interactive and engaging, and certainly having access to a lot more information than what chatbots typically have access to. So when we look traditionally at chatbots, they're normally designed by people, with a certain number of constraints and parameters that allow us to engage, I suppose, at a certain level with that chatbot and get some answers from things. Those answers normally boil down to a little bit of a semi-network of understandings that have been built into that chatbot to respond up to a certain level, and then past that, there's sort of a cap to its capability. And at this point, ChatGPT as a technology is capped, but the 175 billion different, or might be trillion, points of reference that it utilizes are obviously a lot higher than the few that might be built into your average chatbot. So for those people who engage in chatbots, it's a similar kind of idea, except that the technology behind it is a much deeper neural network of content that ChatGPT is able to glean understandings and make its own kind of assumptions based on the technology and the information that's built into it to communicate and then respond to the user's inputs. And it is that response to the input and the continuity of conversation that occurs that I think is much more provides a lot higher level of capability. But I think it's really important to note too that ChatGPT is an enabler of the technology that sits underneath it, and there's a lot of examples of what we would term as AI, but really neural networks on deep machine learning technologies that are providing a way for us to interact with what we would call this AI layer. And we look at things like image generators, there are music generators, there are lots of different enablements that have come from this open AI layer that sits underneath ChatGPT. So tonight we might talk a little bit about, ChatGPT and its capabilities, but really what's sitting on top of this is access to the generative technologies that sit underneath it that act in a way that people can build and respond to, or build on and respond to the information that we give and take in conversation with an enabler like ChatGPT or something similar that might be enabling us to interact with it at that deep machine level. So I'm not sure if that sort of answers the question or not, or if anybody else wants to add a layer on top of that.
Shibani, do you have anything to add to that, or?
I don't have much. I think Jonathan pretty much summarized all of it, but just wanted to emphasize one key thing that's particularly distinctive about ChatGPT from what we've seen before, because research in artificial intelligence and chatbots and AI tools for education is not new. It's been around for decades. We've been using many of those tools. But what's particularly interesting in these tools that come up recently is the ability of having this knowledge or the ability to generate information about almost anything. So previous tools have a knowledge graph or particular set of things that are fed into, like Jonathan said, but this is almost, I guess, going beyond all that we know already. And that brings a lot of excitement, but also, I guess, some challenges and questions about what we want to do with that. And it's an interesting space to explore for educators and students who are navigating the use of these tools in terms of recognizing the limitations and the capabilities and using it for, I guess, the right purposes. And we'll have to define collectively what would be a good use of a tool and what would be a good purpose. And that's something I'm looking forward to engaging with.
And I think that's probably what's sort of happening around now. There's lots of negotiation and discussion and exploration that's sort of bringing all of this kind of conversation together. And a lot of people have had questions about assessment. So let's get stuck straight into assessment. Let's go there now. Matt, I'm going to come over to you and hear your thoughts about assessment. Look, I've got lots of questions, but I think I might just open it up to you to sort of identify what you see as the key themes around ChatGPT and perhaps more broadly artificial intelligence with assessment, and then I can sort of weave in some of the questions if they haven't been raised as well.
Sure, no worries. I guess a couple of points on this one. I have already had several chats with my colleagues who have designed assessment tasks before November last year, which are now being challenged by either perception or reality around these tools. So one prime example would be an HSC English task, which is a really straightforward HSC English task, a writing task, a hand-in task, which now has to be rethought around how they actually do that, what used to be a very simple, straightforward task. Now, there could be arguments around whether that was working in the past, but basically I just asked, look, what is the challenge of ChatGPT and other tools any different to the challenge of what we face with tutors, what we face with older siblings, what we face with parents who have more or less skill in that particular area for any subject? And so if the answer is yes, because it's easier or it's more fun or it's just so accessible, then okay, there are some specific things we need to do. But actually, a lot of the time it comes back to, well, what do we do with academic integrity? What are we already doing with seeing and checking in with students as they complete the work to check that it is their work? And I dare say it applies in higher ed as well as K-12. So that's sort of sitting there as a discussion that we're having already. And then there's the possibilities of actually bringing AI into that conversation and saying, okay, well, let's get ChatGPT or another tool to generate a sample task. And part of the assessment is that students have to mark that sample and they have to show their knowledge by actually marking something that was generated by AI and saying why it is or doesn't deserve a particular mark. And then what they actually submit is their version of that or their, but again, that's not actually a new thing because we've always given samples or we've always modeled responses, given scaffolds, whatever the students need for their particular skill set and learn a difference to be able to engage with that task. So again, as I say it, it's actually not different doing that. It's just we're using a different tool to deliver that sample. So I think people are rightfully and understandably challenged by the tools that are out there because they're so easy, they're publicly accessible, they're not beholden to a school network or a school blocking device. And I've got to say that's where banning, I think, falls down is the fact that it's only a successful ban during the lessons and whilst a student is in a particular network on a particular device. And so I understand that might be the response of some systems to any tool that comes through that hasn't yet got a policy or practice in place. But I think the effectiveness can't really last. And so, yeah, if assessment, and if you go to the sort of Latin root of assessment, it means to sit beside. And so if we're sitting beside our students to help them show their knowledge and skills, then yeah, maybe assessment redesign isn't actually that as difficult as we might fear it is, even though there are some drastically different opportunities we've got now.
Great, thank you. Have you, what's your assessment of what ChatGPT can produce, perhaps in response to an HSC exam question?
Sure, well, we did it in history extension. So a couple of lessons ago, I gave my students a sample, and the first thing they said was, you're always on about a shopping list of historians. So in history extension, they have to compare and contrast different historians' views and other views on particular historiographical issues. And so they said they're mentioning the historian as the first words, Herodotus, blah, 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 blah. And that's what I tell them not to do, because it does sound like a shopping list. And yet this robot is absolutely doing what it thinks the question asks, which is to present a series of interpretations, starting with the name of the historian. So, but then all it takes is for me to then respond to the bot, right, and say, don't do that. And then it stops doing that for that next response. So I think it's that opportunity to interact with these technologies that is unique. Whereas before, perhaps looking at static samples, looking at a PDF or something like that meant you didn't have that interactivity element, but we can actually do it in class. I didn't quite do that in class, but we definitely looked at the sample and interrogated it together. And then just like any other sample of work, and I also gave them previous samples of work from, samples of work from previous classes, as well, as we always do. I scaffolded as well. It was another way to tackle that particular question and interrogate it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you sort of hit the nail on the head there with what a lot of people are saying. And I'm not sure about the number of schools that are actually banning, but we have obviously had that in the media, that there are bans on ChatGPT in schools. Jonathan, I might ask you, and then I'll come to Daniel to talk about maybe the primary side of things. But Jonathan, would you have anything to add to what Matt was saying there around assessment, or particularly HSC or exam level assessment?
Yeah, so firstly, very quickly, from our point of view, we haven't banned, and we don't have any plans to ban ChatGPT. In fact, I went into our IT as one of the first things I did this term and make sure it was open for staff and for students. I think it's a really important tool for us to understand as we move forward and to have access to. That said, technically students 13 to 18 can't use it at school, but we are looking at ways that we might be able to gain approval for that. So that's just something to say there. Because I think that's an important part of the conversation, is to say, think about that as from a strategic point of view. How are you embracing in your school, and what are the people in the school that lead your school thinking about when it comes to that? I suppose around assessment, just to add a couple of things. Firstly, from my point of view, Matt, you're right on the nail. I think we've got to think about how we can utilize this technology, but remember that there have been examples of this and are continuing to be examples of this just by any other means. Tutors, textbooks, things publications we don't have access to. Plenty of students in the past have been in trouble for hiring online writers to do their assignments for them. That by any other means is just quicker, I think, than paying somebody a fee to write something for them, which in some cases is not as expensive as it probably could have been anyway. So I think that's an interesting point to make. I suppose secondly, I would hate to see us lose the written word as a form of expression, and the opportunity for people to develop that skill, I suppose, in so many ways when we're writing for any subject. And I've heard some rumors in different places about teachers who don't believe that things like portfolios of work and other things should be marked with large slabs of text because it could just be plagiarized and as a result of ChatGPT. And I think there's a big risk there of assuming that that's the case. because Matt, I agree with you. We should be knowing our students, and maybe that's something from an HSE perspective that needs to be thought of differently. And that is, how do we actually know the students and the work they've done, particularly from a major work perspective, because those major works are packaged up and sent and marked blind, which I think is an interesting question to raise of the organisations that mark those major works. So that would be something to think of. I suppose the other perspective from me on assessment is, I would worry if we quickly run down, and I know someone's been mentioning this in the comments, I would be very concerned if we decided to run down a path of quickly box everybody in a room, give them a question on the board and ask everybody to write their answer in 40 minutes. I think we throw out all of the incredibly good work that we have done for differentiation, for ensuring students can express themselves in a way that suits them and they're capable of doing, and give them the time to generate their answers and thinking. I think that's a huge risk in education, that we could quickly lose ourselves to the idea of legitimacy over and above the idea of capacity and differentiation for young people to share their knowledge in so many unique ways. So those are my comments, I suppose, as far as assessment's concerned.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. Do you think there will be a response from exam boards and that sort of organisation, or do you think this is something that they will?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, we move differently all the time. I think we're moving more and more around the form of these larger assessment tasks, like the high school certificate or that in any other state. I think we have to start thinking differently about it. We sort of, major works and other things are such a rich, unique resource when it comes to thinking about how a student has actually generated a response over time. Again, I think there are risks in there that we can quickly go down a rabbit hole that might lose that, that value. But I think at some level, we're going to have to see a response from organisations that do govern those larger scale assessment tasks. And I would really hope we don't go down the track of a lockdown browser so we can do all of our exams in that way. So that would be a risk, I think, as well.
Can I piggyback on that for just a minute or so, Lauren?
Please, yeah.
So I'm just thinking, like, I wonder how long it's going to be before students start lobbying for NESA in New South Wales to use AI as a double marker, as a consistent standard, because of all the things these tools can do, it absolutely applies whatever it's trained to do, time and time again, absolutely consistently, right? So if you're a student of English standard and you say, actually, it's more accurate or more fair to have a double marker that's AI, because it will absolutely set that standard across the state for 60,000 papers in 5 minutes. And then the human marker comes along and it's the variable going along those 60,000 papers. If I was a student, I'd probably be leaning towards that to say, actually, that's a more fair assessment of my writing once it's trained to do it, because it's assessing everyone exactly the same way. You're not marking at different times with kids yelling in the background with, your screen's not working, you've got to find another battery or something like that. So I think that might be an angle we haven't seen before, is that some authorities start to go, well, how can we make those external assessments even more fair by applying the rigor that we expect of humans and applying it through these tools?
That's an excellent point. And Shibani, I might ask you your thoughts on that one, because obviously this is an area that you work directly in too.
Yeah, and I also wanted to include one conversation that came up in the chat about developing assessments that are AI proof. And I think that's possible to an extent, but it's really hard to come up with completely AI proof assessments and something we can monitor and police all the time, where if a student has used ChatGPT or not, especially for hand-in assessments. And since we cannot move everything face to face, and that's, like we said earlier, it's probably like going back many years ago, ignoring all of the wonderful research that's been done in education. So I want to point this out in a slightly different angle, because I guess there are two perspectives to look at. One is obviously the academic integrity side, where you don't want students to plagiarize. So we try and make sure that they are they develop academic integrity and don't pass off someone else's work as their own. But there's also this other side of developing the right skills and the right learning outcomes. So it's a question of maybe probably going back to, is our learning outcomes really what we need? Maybe we need to tackle some of those legacy problems in assessments, coming back and saying, what are we assessing? Is that a skill that they need to have, or is it something that can be replaced by a tool? If it is, are there more higher order thinking skills that our students need to be developing? And would AI help enable some of those skills in our learners? And that's a conversation that could lead us into, I guess, thinking about more future-oriented skills for our learners.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. That's fascinating. And I think I'm going to come to you in a moment, Keith, because I do want to talk about that learning design side of things. But maybe, Daniel, first I can ask you to comment on the primary sector, and what are some of the discussions you're seeing around these kind of technologies, and your teachers talk, your colleagues and teachers talking about, and anything around what the students are doing or you would like to see them doing around this technology?
Yeah, probably on a primary level to this point, there's at least with the schools I'm working with, still somewhat limited use and even awareness of students. Maybe a little bit of awareness, but they're not necessarily using it at this stage. But we know these things tend to trickle down, and it's only a matter of time when we'll be having many grade 5, 6 students accessing at home. The age limits, that they're not too worried with things like that with social media. That still has some implications for us at a school level with how we're using that, and making sure that this is something that, when we're talking about academic integrity, that we're able to model that and prepare them for that, and not just completely ignore it at a primary school level before they go off to high school. But I'd say, as far as what I'm doing in my conversations with colleagues, and what I'm showing them and what we're looking at is, how can we use this to improve our planning and our assessments. So even some colleagues today that I introduced to ChatGPT and to AI still probably hadn't quite heard of it. And then we sat down, had a look at it. They said, and we went through some prompts on the types of units of work they were looking at, and they were blown away by how quickly it was able to generate unit of work that we could add connections to the curriculum and design assessment tasks, and they could just see immediately like how it would improve teaching and learning for them and for their students. And these are just with the first few prompts that we could continue to develop and evolve that, as far as creating an outline and creating, and like Matthew mentioned, creating work samples. So to enable us to work more efficiently and help elevate our students' understanding, their skills, knowledge, and understanding to another level. Yeah, so I guess that's what most of our conversations and us kind of having a play around with ChatGPT at this point has been around, which we're already seeing some great potential there.
That's great, and that's actually something I am going to come back to around teachers and all educators and sort of skill sets and how they can make use of it themselves as well. But I want to just come over to Keith now and talk a little bit more about higher education and what some of the conversations that we're having in higher ed, and as a learning design specialist as well, what are your thoughts around the platform and the different technologies available?
The thing that I'm really interested in, and something that I've said to lots of academics and learning designers that I've spoken with, is what we're looking at now is as bad as it's going to get. This is the worst version of ChatGPT that we're going to be using. And even today, I think it was about 12 hours ago, ChatGPT 4, which is a exponential increase, was released. And there's limited access to that at the moment. But I think the conversations that some people are having about how can we try to outwit either the artificial intelligence or our students who might be using the artificial intelligence, they're the wrong conversations, because I don't think you're going to be able to keep up with it. In reality, it's here to stay. And I say that as somebody who is very much aware of all of the troubling aspects of artificial intelligence and the way it's used. And I think we shouldn't have a conversation about IT and artificial intelligence specifically without speaking about some of those troubling aspects. So if you're not aware, there are some deep concerns about how this data has been coded and the way that people who've been responsible for managing that kind of data have been treated. There's concerns about intellectual property rights, especially in relations to the generation of images, because it uses images that artists have shared on the internet, but not necessarily with their permission. And of course, despite the fact that it's called artificial intelligence, it's a deeply human technology, and it reproduces all of the problems within humanity. So that means that you will get, you know, racism and sexism and really quite some ugly kinds of things. And if we know anything about young people and their use of these technologies, they will rapidly find the gaps and the ways to exploit these. And I think you know, we as teachers need to go into this with our eyes wide open. But having said that, I am, and this might be a little bit radical because I'm part of a Australian network of academic integrity people, and all they have talked about for the last month has been, oh my goodness, what are we going to do about ChatGPT? And every couple of days, someone comes up and says, it's okay. They've released a tool that will, you know, tell you whether an essay's been submitted and how much of it has been written by ChatGPT. And then an hour later, someone else will email this group and say, actually, no, it doesn't work. Or it did work, but now it doesn't work again. And that kind of rapid changeover and churn is something that we're all struggling to deal with. But that's one side of things. But personally, I'm really excited about it. I work with learning designers and initial teacher education students. And I'm not in the slightest bit worried about artificial intelligence taking over teachers. And I'm not worried about my assessments either, because my assessments are, you know, go and teach a lesson. As good as ChatGPT is, it can't do that yet. You know, it doesn't get up and walk around the classroom and talk to students. And I think there's an element of truth in that as well. You know, all those industrial technology people, they're not worried about ChatGPT. So I think one possible avenue, one possible area of interest is moving towards more high fidelity, authentic assessments. You know, and that's not going to be possible for all kinds of subjects or key learning areas or anything like that. But gee, it's much more possible than we give credit to, you know. So I think that's the first thing I'd say. You know, let's lean into the opportunity to embrace really authentic assessments where it's possible, and let's forget talking about essays and you know, writing things, and start talking about learning again, you know, which I think is something that this conversation about ChatGPT might have given us the opportunity to do.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, and it reminds me of going back to what Daniel you were saying about the producing of work samples and programs, even units of work. I showed the tool to some initial teacher education students, and their jaws sort of hit the ground as well for that same reason, right? Because it's helping with the efficiency. It's not necessarily producing something that you're going to take and implement immediately into the classroom, but it may, you know, you be a prompt in the same way that you might search for sample units of work online and things like that. So massive potential there.
I think if I can just pick up something there, Lauren.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Keith. I was just going to pick up something you said there that I think was really important, and that is it doesn't take away or it can't replace human experience, and that's two things. Like, it can't replace us as humans in terms of our human connection, Keith, with students. I completely agree there, and from a student perspective, it can't replace their experience. So the more that they generate, you know, a response and a deep think about how what they have learned aligns with their experience, there's no way that we can ever have ChatGPT replace the human experience in the learner either.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Jonathan. Shivani, I'm wondering if you would be able to give us a sense of where this technology is likely to go next. I mean, Keith mentioned that we're at probably the worst version at the current time. What do you see down the track in maybe five years or so, or even 10 years?
I'm sure we don't have to wait that long. The technology is just going so rapidly. Just in the last 6 months or so, like Keith said, they've just come up with a new GPT-4 language model 12 hours ago, and that claims to have more factually correct information. I mean, less hallucinations, and a lot of the limitations that were seen in the previous models are already gone right now. So we can imagine this being taken up in a lot more applications. I guess the future is also more in developing tailored applications that can suit very specific tasks. And if you're logged into the latest version of ChatGPT, it actually gives you a number of different prompts to start with, from use cases that we work with. And, obviously we've been doing a lot of testing, and we've been giving OpenAI a lot of data ourselves, trying our heads around it. And they've taken up a lot of use cases and shown what are the different things ChatGPT can do. So in the future, we can see a lot more integrated use cases across education, but also across different sectors, and seeing how that will evolve. And I just wanted to quickly go back to one of the points that Kate made, and I wanted to highlight the learning process of it. And it also relates a little bit back to assessments. And that's because a lot of our learning and the way we assess learning has traditionally come from looking at products. And writing written products is one example where we go and look at what students write or came up with as an essay or a report. And it makes a lot of sense for us to be looking a lot more on the process, which is how do students come up with the different thoughts, they're writing the ideas, and then it helps us to think through about processes that AI can automate, and what processes do humans still need to be involved in, and what is the human AI interaction that can happen to be effective in some of those engagements with AI. And also the kinds of motivation that we can give to students. So obviously there's a lot of extrinsic motivation, grades, for instance, that some students want to be very good at, or some might just be shooting for a pass grade, for instance, in higher education. But what about the additional intrinsic motivations of what would you do, or what job would you land that AI can't do? And for that, they need to be developing specific skill sets and capabilities. And that's something we might need to highlight as educators, to help them have that kind of intrinsic motivation. And that's something I guess will be more and more important in the future as we have more advanced tools that can do a lot of things much more better than us, because they have more knowledge and data that they've been trained on. So I guess finding that niche and the critical ability and being able to work with these tools and critically engage with these tools would be a key in the future as we start to see more and more advanced tools coming up.
Yeah, and that's something we always talk about: students' digital literacy and supporting the development of their digital literacy. Matt, I'm wondering what you're seeing with the students that you've worked with ChatGPT. Are you seeing them sort of develop some strategies and skill sets around using these types of technology? Are they catching on to it really pretty quickly?
No, not really. They're not too phased about it in a lot of cases. A lot of them don't know what ChatGPT is when I ask them, or they might have heard it floating through social media or something. But yeah, they're not particularly freaking out about it. And when you show them in a way that illustrates what is possible, and you don't fly off the handle, or it's presented like other information too. It's like, I don't know, when in history, at least, when we showed them a great virtual excursion for a tomb in Egypt or something like that, I get excited about that, and they also get excited about some of these tools to help them learn. And I just keep thinking, what if an AI enhanced education means they can reach their personal best in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, in terms of their expression, in terms of their capabilities to do what I think every rationale in every syllabus says, which isn't to be a great mathematician per se, it's to actually use that in some way in the world and in society. So in history, at least, the rationale for the whole history syllabus is actually deeper than knows stuff and does stuff. That's what the syllabus dot points are all about, and what we have to prove that we're following. But actually it's much deeper. It's about being a good citizen and being an active citizen, and knowing about your society, and having a deeper empathy for other people. And maybe AI will help us tick all those boxes we still have to tick. But what if a student could complete, say, Year 10 history by halfway through year 9? You know, what if their ability to progress through certain skill sets and certain capabilities are enhanced and accelerated in a way that is appropriate to their maturity and their age and their context and that sort of thing, but does allow, like, it opens up some other opportunities in timetables and in school days and school years where they can jump into some other meaningful work. And those, like Keith and others have said, those high fidelity pieces of work and experiences, that means, you know, we keep struggling in schools, and I'm sure unis are the same. You keep struggling to find time to do things. But what if AI helps us to speed up some of those aspects, not just on a purely administrative operational kind of side of things, but actually, what if I just really, I'm not a maths person at that stage of my life, and I just need to be able to grow my skills to a particular level and smash that. And we all know that kids forget a whole bunch of stuff from the HSC within about a month of having sat the exams. So there's, I think, that argument about essential knowledge doesn't really fly, at least in the HSC context. But there are some elements that students retain forever. They remember some lessons, they remember some units of work because it made a connection to them. And if AI can help us reduce the workload of stuff that doesn't matter to students and increases the time we can spend on stuff that does matter, and still we can prove our economic viability in society as an education system, then that's a pretty exciting future, I think.
Absolutely. And we're getting a lot of comments about different ways in which it's going to impact on different aspects of education. And my apologies if I don't get to all of these, but we're seeing comments about perhaps more personalised, more ongoing, continuous assessment as opposed perhaps summative sort of styles of assessment. Jonathan, I might ask you if you could sort of comment on that. Do you see the sort of nature of teaching and learning changing quite rapidly in response to this?
I'm going to say I hope so. What do I think in that context? Look, I think it is in some contexts, I think that's possible. I think that there's the potential for it. And like Keith, I'm very excited about that potential. And hopefully, as we're using it more in universities, we bring through younger people with a much better grasp of its capability, and have the ability then to disseminate that knowledge widely within their educational institutions and share that with teachers who are looking for ways to branch out and think differently about the way they teach, their assessment, their I suppose their administrative work, and what that can do differently. Look, COVID brought around some rapid changes, and I think that we've shown really clearly that education can adjust very, very quickly, and can adjust very rapidly, and can adjust very positively in a lot of cases to things like technological change. I hope that schools, institutions, TAFEs, vocational institutions, higher education institutions like universities, I hope that they do embrace it, and I hope they do that quickly and rapidly, as rapidly as the technology evolves, so that there's an opportunity for the technology to provide the best that it can, and of everything that is possible as quickly as possible. But I hope that that's possible. I hope that's something we can do.
We just had an interesting comment here about whether what happens when AI can predict future examination results and career paths. What does this mean for schooling, Shibani? Have you had any thoughts about that one?
Yeah, we've actually had examples of this in learning analytics and artificial intelligence in education research, where they look at data from historically so many years or so and try and predict what happens in the future. And there are obviously ways we can use it for improving the students' career choices, or where you can intervene and try and give feedback for improvement. So if the student is likely to to fail, or you don't expect successful outcomes, is there a way to intervene early? And that's all possible with the power of predictions and with the power of data. But a lot of this needs to come back to the educators and the designers to see what is the effective use of those tools, what are the other ethical concerns in the usage of such student data and learner data. And again, there's a lot of research and literature around learning analytics and how that can be effectively used. But it is, I guess, scary, as well as, I guess, good to think of in terms of the capabilities of tools in the hands of educators, because we might not have that detailed history or knowledge about a learner for over a number of years. But if you do have it, it's a resource where it can help tailor advice and give personalized feedback that we can tap into.
So the technologies are there. It's just a case of whether we, or how quickly, I guess, we'll see them sort of integrated across the different sectors. Yeah. Sorry. Just my dog in the background there, apologies. Daniel, I'm wondering now, when you're thinking about teachers, and obviously there's been some concern, perhaps anxiety around the sort of rapid development of these technologies. What would you like to see be available to teachers in terms of learning about this and actually helping teachers get to grips with things and to use them in a very practical and efficient and purposeful way?
Oh, wow. Probably starts with the department, or each state's department, staying ahead of the game, really. Like we've been talking about, you know, our responsibility, you know, to embrace and understand how to use technology ethically and responsibly. Not just keep doing what we're doing and pretend it doesn't exist. Keep doing things the way we've always done. That's the worst thing I think we could be doing, banning ChatGPT and other AI technology. So what I would like to see, or what I think would need to be doing is, you know, our education departments really taking this seriously and investing in professional learning for teachers, worthwhile, relevant professional learning on what the implications are for, you know, their subject level and their year level for their context. So rather than just leaving it for, you know, everyone to, you know, I guess just figure things out on their own, or
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. Yeah, yeah. I'm going to ask you about higher ed in a minute, Keith, but maybe Matt, you could comment from the secondary perspective, and for teachers that you interact with, is there anything that you would specifically like to see in place to support them as the sort of technology evolves more rapidly?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. One, it's, you know, we're the most trained we've ever been. We're the most qualified that we've ever been as a profession. We've got more information at our fingertips than ever before, but we've also made everything so safe and predictable and repeatable in order to keep it at scale, that when this comes along and says, hey, you know, when ChatGPT tells you I do scalable and repeatable and predictable really, really, really well, it's sort of an irony that we've gotten to this point as an education system that everything is tracked so that we can know what probably happens in a year 8 history class in Tasmania and what happens in a year 9 maths class in New South Wales because it's in a document somewhere. And so, yeah, it's just that's the context we're in with this new thing to blast through. And I see the point about the calculator and the end of the mathematician, and it wasn't, and it was an enhancement of that. And you know, it's like, you know, Eddie Wu is probably the most famous math teacher in maybe the world at the moment, but his power isn't just the fact that he's a skillful educator, it's that he's an engaging educator. And then he's able to actually draw people in with appropriate tools and resources and environments, not just the functional thing of maths. And I think that's where teaching goes to, and where great learning is in those moments as well. But if we do make ourselves just functional, like, and if schools only focus on compliance and only on those elements of driving through curriculum steps and those sorts of things, then of course we're going to be susceptible to these massive changes by a very, very, very sophisticated calculator. And yeah, so I guess in conversations, it's about, okay, which parts of your job can be helped with AI and which parts can't? Because of course, teaching in any context, higher ed, primary, secondary, whatever, it's like saying, you know, we can automate parenting. Good luck. I mean, my daughter had a 45-minute tantrum last night. I wish AI could solve that, but it won't yet. And even if I had a robot who was super calm and super, you know, the whole time, that'd be great. But that doesn't mean it fixes everything as a parent, or that I should do that in that particular scenario, because she needs to know that I'm actually there, and that even if I lose a little bit, I'm still there as a human being, as a parent. So yeah, it's what are those bits of a task. So when someone asks, you know, what jobs are going to be lost, well, I guess it's those jobs that are in entirety predictable and repeatable and scalable and based on a set of static understandings, and information. They're the jobs that are going to go. Parts of jobs will go, and I want to see parts of jobs go. I don't want teachers filling out forms for big chunks of their day or doing follow-up paperwork and that sort of stuff. It would be great. That's you've got to do some of it, but I want them to be doing more educational research into their own practice and doing that reading and doing that professional learning that I mentioned earlier, so that we can actually enhance what we do and go into a next phase of what we can offer in education. Because if we don't, then students are going to go, well, where's my best place for learning? And it may not be in school. And if that happens, then we're in trouble.
And that's a really good point to sort of cross over towards higher education, Keith, I think, as well, because as a learning designer in higher education, we have our sort of traditional style degrees, but there are obviously lots of competing areas. So what are you thinking around teaching in higher education? What are you thinking about how higher education educators are feeling, and is there something that we need to be doing more to support and help in those areas?
I'm going to kind of give you the worst possible answer and say, I don't know yet, because I think it's still very new for so many people. What and in typical academic fashion, but I do have a few thoughts. And I guess my thoughts are this, I don't think we as an education community, and I'm including everybody who works in education in that very general statement, I don't think we can wait for governments or large organizations or institutions to do the heavy lifting for us. The best stuff that I've ever seen is when teachers and learning designers get together and organize their own stuff and come up with their own ideas and solutions. Now, obviously, you've got to work within your particular institutional frameworks and things like that. But I'm thinking of, the huge success of things like Teach Meets, shout out to Matt there, but also lots of other networking opportunities. This is where the really interesting stuff happens. And what we've got to do, and this is why I can't answer your question, is we've got to try to explore and find ways that ChatGPT is being used that kind of really push what's possible in the classroom. So let me give you just a couple of examples, things that I've seen that I thought were really, really cool. So I saw a primary school classroom using artificial intelligence to interview a politician who doesn't exist, in ChatGPT. And it was run through the teacher. The teacher was the one typing in the questions and then reading out the answers. But in every sense, we had young people acting as active and informed citizens and getting real as they're ever going to be, answers back. I thought that was brilliant. Another example, I love to have a good scenario, and especially lots of different scenarios in my classrooms, about how you might design a learning intervention for this or a learning intervention for that. But gee, they take me forever to write. My brain only comes up with so much creativity every hour, right? And once I've written one scenario, I've kind of run out of ideas. And so, I offloaded that task to ChatGPT. I said, write me 4 scenarios, make them each 300 words long about this, and bang, it did it, I gave them to my students today. Could they tell the difference between that and the one that I created? No. Did they care even when I explained it to them? No. I spent probably half an hour of one of my lessons today teaching the students how to create good lesson plans. And I think we dipped into some of the old classics like Gagne's, events of instruction and Merrill's learning design principles and all that kind of stuff. And then we tested it out on ChatGPT. We said, we want you to devise a stage 1 lesson plan for, place or something like that. And we want you to use the events of instruction. And it spat out this incredible lesson plan. And then we ripped it apart and said, oh, it's missing this and it's missing that. And I think that's a really crucial thing that we've got to keep into mind as we start to use more and more of these AI tools. They are best used by people who know a little bit about what they're asking it to do. Because if I was a brand new teacher or even not a teacher and I saw this lesson plan, I'd probably think it's perfectly fine. But because I know a little bit about it and my students know a little bit about it, we were able to spot the weaknesses and use that to improve our own practice, right? The other thing is we need to be careful of, well, there's going to be a lot of terms coined, all right? But I think chat-splaining is one that's going to stick around. I didn't come up with it. But the way that a lot of these chatbots, and it's not just ChatGPT, it's a lot of the other tools as well, they speak with such authority. And often, not always, but sometimes it's false authority. So we need to be really, really comfortable in pushing back against a faceless construct that appears to know what it's talking about. And I think that's part of a good education system, speaking truth to power in many ways. So to sum up, let's as educators start working out what we want to do with this, and let's not wait for governments or anyone else to try to put rules in place, because we'll be waiting a long time if that's the case.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of professional learning networks, where you can connect with people online, you can connect with people through Teach Meets. There's lots of opportunities to meet and share ideas and to get access to other people's ideas and thinking around these things as well. And it's interesting, sorry, I'm just monitoring here as well that somebody's talked about AI embedded in MathSolver, and I'm aware that we're running out of time, but I did want to mention that because we have got a bit of AI creep into some of the platforms that are traditionally used for education. I know Canva, for example, that's got a magic write function now, where you can ask it to write, a set of slides for you for a presentation and things like that. So that's another area that we need to be aware of and to understand, and that students will be using, guaranteed. So I'm going to ask everybody just to finish off now, and I'm sure we could go for another hour very easily. What's one thing that you would say to the audience here about ChatGPT and AI more broadly, and how we sort of move forward with this? Maybe Shibani, I'm going to come to you first.
I'd like to jump off from one of Keith's points about the educators being in charge and in the central of taking responsibility, because policies and guidelines can help us to an extent, but it's always the teacher and the educator who knows a lot more about the context, about its application and how the students are going to be effectively using it. So that's something to keep in mind. But I guess one of the key take-home messages I would leave them with is, if we are using AI, any AI, whether ChatGPT or any other AI, the one question to keep in mind is, I guess, the outcome out of it. Is it adding to our own learning or capability, or is it undermining it? If we are offloading and just supplanting all our the key foundational skills to a tool that can use it, would our learners ever be able to acquire their skills in the first place, to be able to even work with these tools in the future? And I'll leave it with that.
Fantastic, thank you. Jonathan, I'm going to ask you next.
No worries. Look, I would leave everybody with this. I think engage in critical discourse with your colleagues, have a go at it. If there's any fear in your mind about, what can this do? This worries me. Find the IT people at your school. For those that are here from Loretto, you're welcome to come and find me. Have a conversation, have a go. Ask it your assessment questions. Ask it some things that you do in your work that you think are boring, that you don't want to be doing, because I think that once you have a go at it, like we did during COVID, when you have a go at something, you will find that it is less fear-inducing and actually fun to have a go at. So I'm always open for a conversation and always open to having a go at something new. So, definitely get out there and enjoy the opportunity that this is presenting, and look up Dolly and start looking at some pretty cool AI-generated art, because that's fun. Lots of fun.
Yes, thank you. Daniel.
I guess really similar to what Jonathan was saying. Just don't be scared of it, and ask somebody, get on, have a go, have a play around with it, and learn how you can make that work for you and fit in with your context to help enhance. Use it as a tool to help enhance your teaching and the learning outcomes for your students, to help it make you more efficient and more productive. Similar to what Matt was saying before, that you can use that as a tool to cut down some of the very time-intensive admin work, or to help you get your ideas structured. I mean, for me, that's how I'm looking at using it. to get a bit of an outline with what I'm trying to get across. Sometimes that's a little bit difficult with, I know a lot of people probably relate to, and you've got a lot of ideas floating around, trying to get those down to text. You end up worrying about grammar and spelling and text structure, and a lot of those ideas are gone. So definitely best thing you could do, get on, have a look, and you'll definitely find a way that it will benefit you.
Makes it work for you in your context. Yeah. And Matt?
Yeah, just to sort of piggyback on that as well, AI will only ever be your assistant. So educators aren't used to having an assistant mostly, you know, not many of us have EAs or something like that. So treat it as an assistant. It's not going to answer all the questions for you in exactly the way you want, but you can throw it some tasks, you can ask it some questions, and it will give you back what an assistant would, which is, here's what I think, but it's up to you to actually then contextualize it and use your agency, which you don't lose just by having an AI assistant handy there. And I just do a shout out to teachertoolkit.ai. If you want a really easy way to get into this for teachers, teachertoolkit.ai is really cool. I've chatted to the guy who's run it, and he's just really trying to do a good thing by teachers. So give that a shot. If you haven't got anything else, that's a good place to start. Yeah,
absolutely is. Thank you. And Keith?
I'm going to give you homework, actually. It's the teacher in me, right? So go have a look in your fridge and see what's in the fridge, and then type it into ChatGPT and say, make me a recipe out of what I've got in the fridge. Okay, maybe it's because I'm hungry. Just to show you how cool it is. That's a great little experiment.
And unfortunately, we have to finish up there, but I would love to maybe open up this discussion later in one of our later sessions in the year. But also, I would like to say, please engage with us online. This is an area that I also research in. So please look for us on Twitter and other platforms and connect with us. And we're happy to chat at any time. So thank you so much to our wonderful panel this evening. It's been absolutely fabulous. So much information. Thank you. And I'm handing over back now to Pat to finish up for us. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Lauren. Well, this brings us to the end of our discussion tonight. And on behalf of the Teachers Guild of New South Wales Council, I would like to thank our distinguished panel, Daniel, Matthew, Shabani, Jonathan, and Keith, for your time and dedication in engaging us all in a very informative discussion on the opportunities and challenges on our important topic today. The Teachers Guild of New South Wales thanks you for your friendship and congratulates you on the work that you've been leading in making education the vibrant professional association that it is. So thank you once again. Just in terms of follow-up, the event recording will be sent out along with a certificate of attendance and a short post survey to help us shape our future for the monthly online webinars that we run. So once again, thank you for joining our event, and we look forward to seeing you at future Guild events. Please stay safe and well. Thank you. Bye.